Now, should we stop having kids to save the planet? So one woman has pledged to never have children because she feels that she shouldn't bring them into a world when she doesn't know whether it's going to really exist in 100 years' time. Jessica Lorimer has said that she even asked her husband to get a vasectomy. Let's probably stop that occurring. She says that not only is raising a child in today's world incredibly difficult, given the childcare costs, the hit on women's careers, but she also claims that it's selfish to add to the strain on the next generation. However, the UK's birth rate has fallen to its lowest levels since records began, and this could bring its own problems, like having nobody to care for our ageing population. So what do you think? Is it irresponsible to have kids when it looks like this year will be the hottest one on record? Or do you think actually it's wrong to tell women not to have children? 0207 862 2222. Andy?
Well, I wouldn't tell a woman whether she should or should not have children.
And please, we'll have to ignore the fact that I am clearly carrying a child right now. So there we go. Trying to remain as balanced on this as we will not make it personal. Yes, exactly.
I judge you for it. No,
feel free to judge.
Listen, I've said before on this programme that I would absolutely love to be a dad. I would love to have children. It's my only regret, I suppose, as being a gay man, is that it's difficult for me to do that. And it
difficult, but not impossible.
Not impossible, but it means I have to make a choice in a way that maybe if I was straight, I wouldn't quite in the same way have to. But I am sympathetic to this because I do look at the world now and I think it's all connected. For me, it's climate, but it's also war. I'm scared about what the next 50, 100 years have in store for our planet. I do think they're connected. I look at what China and Russia and countries are doing in Africa to try and claim land, looking ahead to what is clearly going to be a really difficult situation for humanity. Whether you believe that the climate is changing as fast as scientists are claiming it is or not, we can all see that the climate is changing and that we are going to be facing a real pinch actually on supplies, and that is going to lead, I think, to famine and war. And do I want my child to grow up in that world? I'm really not sure I do.
Okay, Lowri, you have a few children.
Hundreds of, well, between my sister and I, my twin and I, we've got 7 between us, okay? So clearly, although I said I'd never have children, so that something happened.
How did that happen?
Well, I had one. The thing is, when you have a child, obviously it's an act of optimism to have a child, or it could be an accident. But anyway, if you choose to, it's an act of optimism. And actually having children, I think, makes me more optimistic for the future because it is a miraculous thing, and small children in particular see the world in such a kind of they are amazed by it, and they are very open. And so I think it makes you less, more hopeful in a way that they will do things differently, whether that turns out to be the case, but you hope so. I think every person, man or woman, obviously has a choice about whether they have children and what reason you have. But I think that with this young woman, there is a slight kind of virtue signalling. Look at me, I'm such a martyr. I've decided not to have children for the sake of the planet. And you think, calm down. You can make the decision, but do you have to advertise it to everybody? I mean, there's presumably she's got a T-shirt made, or she got tote bags or water things which she could hand out to people. See, I'm not having children. I mean, I think that that is slightly irritating that she's doing that.
I mean, I don't doubt for a second. I can't even imagine what it feels like to love your kid. I can't even put it into words. And it would frighten me, terrify me, looking at this little person, thinking, what are you going to face when I'm not here to look after you?
But I think my parents would have thought the same thing, you see. And I think that, when you're parenting, you're bound up in the everyday of looking after that child. You don't think every single minute of the day, oh my God, the world is about to end. You get on with life. It's about getting on with life. It's about forming relationships. It's about helping somebody develop. There are lots of other elements to it.
And I think,
no, I don't think it does. To me, I think that, yes, we should worry about all sorts of geopolitics, but the idea that simply the act of having a child is a climate catastrophe, I personally would rather think about how are the rest of us behaving in terms of what are we consuming, how are we farming. Those are much more important decisions we make than I won't have a child because, my goodness, that's one more mouth to feed.
Well, I seen a graphic earlier which showed the carbon impact of having a child on an individual compared to if you recycle or compared to if you switch your car to an electric car. And having a child is a dramatically larger impact on your carbon footprint.
I'd be interested in who produced that little graphic, to be honest, because I just think if you looked at the graphic of, for example, if you don't have children, let's say you become ill, you could talk about the climate impact of the medicine that you have to use. If you're somebody who eats out a great deal or travels and goes on holiday as a single parent, what is the carbon impact of that? It's about the way you live holistically, not just about how much.
But on a very
young people, sorry, Storm, I just want to say, I spend a lot of time talking to young people in schools and things when I do my talks. And one of the things that they say, and it's not the kind of teenage strop of, I didn't even ask to be born. They genuinely do feel as though they've been given a weight and an expectation to save the world that they didn't really ask for. And they've been given it by previous generations that aren't taking responsibility. And I think we do have a responsibility as the generation having kids now to ask ourselves, actually, is this a world that is going to nurture children, or are they going to have a horrible time?
Well, I mean, definitely that's clearly this lady's argument is that climate change is the reason she's not having children. But what she says is having children is selfish. And I thought that in itself is a very interesting light, because
I think that's a very
is there an element of selfishness to having children?
I think that's a really dissociated position here, because as a human species, it's this idea that we can divorce ourselves from the fact that we are animals, and as animals we have to eat and we have to reproduce. Those are the two most important things we do. But of course she believes that she's some kind of higher being. An entire generation believe this, of course, that actually no, it's instinctual to need to reproduce. Now, you can choose not to do that, and you can be a sort of modern person who chooses not to do that. But actually the instinct is there within all of us, and we shouldn't be made to feel guilty because we're selfish for wanting to have children.
But there are already children in this world that are looking to be taken care of. They needed adopting or fostering. The want to have your own biological child with the person that you're in love with.
But you know the biological imperative of that.
No, it's not indulgent
no,
about
it's in our DNA to reproduce.
This is something I think particularly women who I know who've chosen not to have children do face this accusation that they're being somehow superior about it and smug about it. And I wonder if that does come from a little bit of bitterness on the part of some parents who actually see the impact having children has had on their lives. And they're a bit jealous that they can't carry on with their lives in the way that their friends do who don't have kids.
No, I don't think I think that's quite patronising, actually, of all parents. I think that, again, if you choose to not have children, that's absolutely fine, but you don't get a gold star for doing that. You don't get how fantastic you are. You've just made a different decision.
Might we agree on this? Right, this is my only thought about it, against it was, if you are a parent who self-selects not to have kids, are they exactly the parents we want to be having kids? People who are...
Oh, that's really good. Like, people that don't want to be politicians, are they very much the ones that we should have in the House of Commons?
Like, I want parents to be bringing kids to the world who are, aware of geopolitics, who are informed,
well, so only nice
liberal
liberal people get to have children, and not those terrible right-wing people. They shouldn't be allowed to have any... I mean, my goodness, what are we talking about now?
It doesn't matter where you stand in this argument. It is such an interesting debate and discussion to be had. Karen from County Durham, what's your thoughts on having children? Is it selfish? Would you worry about it because of climate change? Karen.
Hello.
Hi.
You can hear me.
I can.
Yeah. I think we should replace this word selfish with self-indulgent.
Yeah.
Because you're only having a child for yourself, really. Because if you think about the future it's facing and what it has to do just to function as a person, it's not a great outlook, is it?
Well, Karen, you could say that for every generation. You could say that for my parents having me, was self-indulgent of them, looking forward to a life where my generation weren't going to get the same privileges as them, not likely to get a pension, not likely to be able to afford their own property, very difficult to get a job in the industry that they're getting their education
and
is in, having
condition.
to pay. Yeah, but Karen, I'm glad that they had me. I'm glad that I exist and I have lived this wonderful life, even though there are struggles for my generation, even though that I have faced struggles. I am glad that I have been able to experience this.
You say you've had a wonderful life. What about all the things that we have to deal with knowing about what's happening to other species? Would you say that's wonderful?
But if you have a child, and if that's something that you really care deeply about, you discover that with your child together, and you might then have the child that finds a solution to that. I don't think it's this idea that the act of having a child is such an amazing thing, and the love you share with that child, and the relationship and the connections that are formed as part of a family, a wider family, that in itself is a reason to live for many people. It's what lifts up the day-to-day, get up, go to work, come home, watch TV, go to bed, do that over and over, that terrible terrible Groundhog Day. Having a family and having children, whether they're biological or adopted, whatever, is that's what life's about, isn't it, Karen?
I don't dispute the pleasure of that, the pleasure of family, and I love my nieces and nephews, but you have to, if you look at other species and what we have to deal with as a species ourselves in what we're doing to everything else, and I really do believe it is everything else is suffering as a consequence of what we are, then I think, where's the pleasure in that? I couldn't have condemned a child to know what's happening to all the other species because of us.
All right, Karen, I hear your point. I mean, there are tragedies all over the world and we deal with current affairs. I mean, some of the stories that you have to read on a daily basis are absolutely harrowing. It doesn't mean that I don't want to live or that I don't enjoy my life. It means that maybe I'm compelled to make a difference and try and do something to make it better. But you think the impact of just existing is our problem. Karen, thank you very much for your call. Patrick from Wiltshire, how do you feel about having children? Do you think it's an act of selfishness because you're bringing them into a world which may not exist in 100 years?
No, absolutely not. I am the father of 7 children. My wife, the one wife, I have 4 daughters, 3 sons, and at the moment 15 grandchildren.
Wow.
I believe that we are committing a kind of suicide for the future if we stop having children. The population has fallen to 1.4 per woman. We should be having more children. We won't be able to fill the jobs to do the functions of the country.
Patrick, that might be true if you're only looking at us in isolation of the United Kingdom, but actually the global population is increasing, and so that there'll be plenty of people. We'll just have to deal with migration in a different way and accept it probably a little bit more. So it certainly won't be human suicide, but it might be British suicide.
Well, I think it's a rather silly, if you put it that way, reason that we are not having children as the women that made her husband have the vasectomy. If we're only,
well, she asked.
If it's a fear of what might happen in 50 years' time, 100 years' time. Come on, when I was at school in the 70s, there were stage. It's not certain. So the Thames froze over here in 1700s. We go from cold to, I'm looking out here, there's a severe frost outside. It's not a certainty, so we shouldn't do things on the basis of a fear. I think we should have more children and, go forth and multiply.
Okay.
And as I say...
as you have, you certainly have.
Four of my children have good degrees. A couple are teachers, a couple are managers,
Patrick, it sounds like you've done incredibly well and you've certainly played your part in contributing to the numbers. Thank you very much for your call. Thanks for all your calls on that.